Summon the Gods by Melinda Kucsera, Book 2 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy.
Part 7.
Chapter 26, Raiders in Time. Well, if there was one thing the Lithirians were good at, it was making sure their creations had clean, running water. Rosalie wrung out her hair, then dried her hands on a clean dress, eerily similar to the one hanging over a chair to dry. They arrived yesterday by her count. All she did last night was get clean, eat something, and find somewhere to sleep so she could avoid Ran and all the questions he must be dying to ask. Now that she'd breakfasted and washed up, she was ready to deal with the world again. Rosalie stretched, then checked to make sure the summoning spell was still in her skirt pocket, and the crystal that might have stopped time was in there too. I'd better find Ivarian and plan our next move. Unfortunately, the library was huge, with multiple sitting areas draped in blankets and sheets and whatever else Ran wished for to give the people staying here some privacy. And she wasn't rude enough to peek around them to check for Ivarian. I'll just wait for him to rise. We're bound to run into each other anyway, since there are only so many places to go. Or so she thought until Ran walked by. But Ran stopped and walked back toward her like he had an idea. That mischievous twinkle was back in his green eyes. Why did that make her giddy with excitement?
Hey, if you're feeling up to it, I'm putting together a raiding party, and I could use another pair of hands to carry stuff if you're interested.
Ran shoved his hands into his pockets and tried to look like he wasn't hoping for her to say yes. Rosalie touched the sheath hidden under her sleeve. It was still there, since she buckled it in place after she bathed this morning, but touching it grounded her. I should find Ivarian and head back to the past to change this future back to the one that should exist. But I left Ran here with the survivors for who knew how long already. Perhaps I could spend a few days here and help him resupply. Sure, what did you have in mind? Rosalie gestured for him to go on. Perhaps they could talk too on the way. Ran was sharp and more observant than most people. Maybe that was because he was the son of a powerful mage, or maybe that was just who he was, but not much got past him. And his father was an earth mage. Rosalie rested her hand in her pocket over the crystal shard. He might recognize it, or know how to identify it.
My plan is pretty simple as plans go. We sneak out, steal some food and anything else we find, then sneak back to the library.
Ran shrugged like that wasn't a dangerous mission. But damn her, it sounded a lot more fun than traveling back in time to unravel a mystery. I still don't know exactly where we need to go back to or what to do when we get there, but she was certain those shape-shifting demons that popped out of portals were a huge clue. I just wish I knew where to slot them into the puzzle. Rosalie suppressed a sigh. This would give her a headache if she let it. Perhaps it was time to put the puzzle down for a bit and do something to help someone else. Sometimes all one needed was a little time away from a problem to see the solution. And Ran was a mage himself. Perhaps he'd see something she missed. Can we go now? Rosalie couldn't think of anything she might need for this, except maybe trousers, so she didn't scratch up her knees if she ended up crawling for any length of time.
That was the plan. My uncle's still asleep, and I might have wished for him to sleep in this morning so we could go and return before he wakes up. Otherwise, he'll just worry himself sick about me.
Ran waved to a blanket draped over a chair. That worry went both ways, so Rosalie wasn't surprised that Ran wanted to leave his uncle behind where he was safe. Who else is coming?
I'm coming, obviously,
Neural said as he fell into step with them.
I couldn't leave you behind even if I tried.
Ran strode through an aisle between bookshelves without a backward glance.
Then it's a good thing you didn't try.
Is it just the three of us? Rosalie glanced behind her, but no one else had joined them.
Unless you want to bring your boyfriend.
Ran turned and walked backward just so he could wink at her. No, he should get some rest. Rosalie ignored the boyfriend comment. Ran liked to tease her about that, and she'd missed it. In this crazy situation, it was a little piece of normalcy. How are we getting out without disturbing the barricade in front of the door? Rosalie could think of one way. Would Ran do it? She braced herself for an argument.
I wish we were in the hallway outside the library.
Ran shrugged like that was no big deal. Are you feeling all right? Because the Ran I know would have argued that was too dangerous. Rosalie rested the back of her hand against his forehead when the aisle ended at the atrium, and she could stand beside him.
I'm fine, and I've had plenty of practice. No rule can vouch for that.
Ran sidestepped her as he removed a white rock from his pocket. It glowed as he bounced it on his palm like it was a ball. Did he really? Rosalie turned to Neril.
Yeah, and I only had to argue with him a little.
Neril held his thumb and forefinger an inch apart. The handle of some kind of weapon poked out of a sheath on his back. Ran was unarmed as usual and still wearing his father's green uniform. uniform. But he could just wish for what he wanted, so he didn't need to carry anything. Why are we really going out there? Rosalie rested a hand on his shoulder and turned him to face her. Can't you just wish for more food and poof? There it is? Rosalie snapped her fingers.
Yes, and I've done that already multiple times, but for a wish to come true, it needs to be possible. And I don't know what the situation is down at the farms.
Rand slipped from her grasp again and bounced the glowing rock on his hand. Are you saying you're having trouble believing there's still any food left under the mountain? Rosalie winced when her question echoed off the stone walls of the atrium.
Shh, we don't want anyone else to know.
Rayan covered her mouth and glanced around to make sure no one else heard them. Since no one wandered out of an aisle, perhaps no one had heard. With all the blankets and sheets draped everywhere to carve out a little privacy for the survivors living here, that fabric may have absorbed the echoes. Rosalie hoped it had. She didn't come here to undermine Ran or anyone's faith in him. Sorry, I didn't mean to ask that so loudly. Rosalie lowered her voice and hoped their conversation didn't echo anymore.
It's okay.
Rand still didn't relax, though. His shoulders were so tense they bunched up, and he kept scanning the aisles that radiated off the atrium for listeners.
But to answer your question, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I've been wishing for food for months now, and it gets harder every day to make that wish come true, so it's time I went down to where the food grows and fetched it myself. I need to see the farms anyway to see if they're still growing stuff. The Lutherians built them to be self-sustaining, but I don't know if they'll keep producing if the demons trash them.
Where are these farms? I don't think I've ever seen them. Which meant they were probably on a lower level that required a long climb down narrow, twisting stairs. Rosalie clenched her fists. They'd be exposed the whole time, and one wrong move would echo and alert any demons close by.
The farms are on a lower level. If we can get to them, we can bring back some fresh fruit and vegetables and like a wish for more.
Rand bounced the rock higher, and it glowed brighter.
I hope you know where they are.
Neural stepped closer to Rand. Rosalie did too, right before a white flash blinded her. When she could see again, the doors of the library stood in front of her, but there was nothing piled in front of them. She turned, and a hallway led away from those closed doors. Above, the lunar crystals still glowed, casting enough light to show no demons lurking there. That was probably Rand's doing, since he could clear away a small group of demons with a wish, but that was only temporary, since he didn't know where he sent them. They might just reappear at the foot of the mountain and come back inside to rejoin their brethren. What do demons eat? Rosalie never thought to ask that, but she wondered that now since they occupied most of the underground city. Did they eat anything at all since they came from hell? Were they even alive? Perhaps she should find out more about her enemy before she went back to the past. That might help.
I don't know, I never stopped to ask one. But in my defense, the only demons I met were trying to cleave my head in, so I couldn't question them.
Rand strode past her, still holding that glowing rock.
We should be quiet since we don't know where the demons are now, or what they're doing.
Nero glared at her as he passed her.
Unfortunately, I don't have my dad's gift for that. He could tell you their number, what weapons they have, and where they all are with staggering accuracy.
Rand slipped the rock into his pocket and hunched his shoulders.
I really miss him.
Doesn't he still appear every day? Rosalie rushed to his side and lowered her voice so only Rand would hear.
No, I haven't seen him since right after you disappeared.
Why don't I scout ahead so you two can catch up?
Nero glanced at a statue in the next section of the hallway. Sure, that's a great idea, Rosalie whispered as she waved him to go on ahead. She understood his caution, but she really needed to talk to Rand, and he needed someone to talk to as well.
We'll be quiet.
Rand crossed to the side of the wide hallway, so he wasn't standing in the middle of it in plain view. Rosalie followed him, even though she should have crossed to the other side, but that would have made conversation difficult.
If I signal for silence, though, you both have to shut up.
Nerul whispered louder than he needed to. We will. Go on ahead, we'll follow, and we'll be quiet. She could hold a quiet conversation if Rand cooperated. Nerul didn't wait for anything else. He crept around the statue and hurried to the next one, peered around it to make sure no one was there, then repeated the process.
It's all clear to the next intersection.
What did you find in the past? Everand wouldn't tell me, but you're bursting to talk about it, so tell me everything.
Rand darted out from behind the statue, and she followed him until Nerul signaled for them to take cover. I'd rather you look at this. Rosalie pulled him behind a statue of a rearing horse, then pulled the crystal shard out of her pocket. The air around them became charged and as thick as pea soup. Rosalie struggled to hold the crystal up. An invisible weight settled on her hand and pushed it down.
What are you two doing?
Sarn peered behind Rand and glanced at the crystal.
What is that?
He reached for it, and the invisible force pinning Rosalie to the wall released her.
Dad, you're back.
Rand turned and hugged him. Can you identify this? Rosalie pulled her hand back before Sarn could touch the crystal. Why don't I want him to hold it? The fear that gripped her in icy hands and squeezed was totally irrational and uncalled for. Sarn was a stone mage. He was exactly the right person to handle a crystal with magical properties, but she couldn't bring herself to give it to him. The crystal pressed into her palm like it wanted to get away from him too, but that made no sense. If Sarn noticed, he gave no sign, but he was too polite to say anything. Ran, on the other hand, had no such compunction.
He can't identify it if you don't hand it over. My dad's powerful, but even his power has limits.
Ran kept one arm around his father and clung to him, like he could anchor him to this timeline. It would be better for the survivors if he did. Sarn could use his magic to remodel the library to create real living spaces instead of what Ran and his uncle cobbled together.
It's not any type of Lumiere crystal I've ever seen.
As Sarn stared at the crystal pressing into her palm, his eyes glowed a brighter green. Is a Lumiere crystal? Rosalie stared at it too.
All magical crystals are, since they're the only crystals with the right structure to store magic, but it's not a type I recognize. This one doesn't store any kind of magic I can see or sense. I'm sorry I can't tell you anything more than that.
Sarn shook his head and rubbed his eyes. That's more than I knew before, thank you. Rosalie slipped the crystal shard back into her pocket. When she glanced at him again, Sarn was gone.
I wish he'd stay.
Rand stared at his boots as he wiped his eyes. Someday he will, because I will fix this. I just don't know how yet. Rosalie wrapped an arm around him.
Are you two coming or what? The way's all clear to the next staircase.
Nerul whispered as he poked his head out from behind another statue further down the hallway. We're coming. Lead the way. Rosalie waved for him to go on.
Will you tell me what happened when you disappeared?
Rand stepped out from behind the statue and crept toward where Nerul waited for them by a stone portal. That must lead to a staircase. Sure. Rosalie told him everything, except the part about a talking snake. She had some pride left. Maybe it was all the biblical stories she heard growing up that made her hesitate about talking about Layla. Nerul put a finger to his lips to signal for silence before he crept through the portal and scanned the landing and what he could see of the spiral staircase disappearing into the darkness below. Rosalie tapped his shoulder. Forget about the echoes for a moment. We need light to see. And there were no Lumiere crystals in the stairwell, just darkness beyond the glow from the ceiling in the hallway outside the stairwell.
She's right. They'll see the glow from our crystals before they hear us.
Rand pulled a glowing crystal from his pocket. What Sarn said before repeated in her mind. Why hadn't she noticed that Rand used Lumiere crystals for more than light?
What are you staring at?
Rand elbowed her in the side. Rosalie shoved her hand into her pocket and pulled out the crystal shard again. It pulsed with power, sending rings of barely visible magic out.
What's it doing?
Rand bent to look at it, and that just reminded her how much taller he was.
I don't think we should use Lumiere crystals. Their light will be too visible in the dark.
Nerul reached for the crystal in Rand's hand and froze.
Nerul?
Rand shook his friend, but Nerul didn't even bat an eye. I think this crystal can stop time, or slow it. I'm still not sure which. Rosalie clenched her fist around it. Rand whirled to face her.
What about Nerul? Can you unfreeze him?
I don't know how it froze him in the first place, so how can I undo it? Rosalie opened her hand and stared at the crystal. I don't know why we're not affected, but she had a guess. After all, she and Rand were both magic users.
We can't leave him here. What if a demon finds him?
Rand scrubbed a hand over his face. Can you wish this crystal had no effect on him? Rosalie held it out to him.
I could try, but what if that hurts him? I don't want to hurt my friend.
Rand paced the landing. It was only about 6 feet long, though. Then I guess you'll need to wait here and protect him. Rosalie didn't know what else to tell him. Hopefully all the demons under Mount Airdren were affected by the crystal, but it was only a shard as long as her finger, so it might not be powerful enough to affect everyone.
That's an even worse idea. I'm not exactly a fighter. You met my dad, and he raised me to respect all life. I can fight if I need to, but I don't like to hurt people. That's why I wish the demons away.
Rand folded his arms and leaned against the wall next to the portal to the hallway. Then there was only one thing left to try. Rosalie touched the crystal to Nerul's outstretched hand, and he stirred.
What happened?
Nerul sagged, and she slipped an arm around him. My magical crystal malfunctioned. Unfortunately, you took the brunt of it. I'm sorry about that. I didn't know that would happen. But at least now we have a way to get to the farm without any demons stopping us. Rosalie grinned, and she had a perfect opportunity to test its range and ability.
What are you talking about?
Nerul rubbed his forehead as he staggered over to the wall. Rosalie redirected him toward the first step. Come on, I'll show you. Rand, you lead the way. I need to stay close close to Nerul so my crystal doesn't affect him.
Yes, ma'am.
Rand saluted as he passed her, that cheeky mage. Rosalie rolled her eyes but didn't comment about that ma'am thing. Instead, she listened for footsteps. I hope there are lots of demons in the lower levels. The more there were, the better for her test. I need to know what it can do before Avarian takes us back in time. Perhaps the crystal could do more than stop time, and that was an encouraging thought. I've finally got an edge.
Chapter 27. Disguise Time. Garen rubbed his hands together and tried not to cheer. Now they were talking. Well, not about destroying the gateway, but he could get behind the go to the gateway part of the plan. Except, of course, he would do more than look at it. But Arginil and his angelic friend didn't need to know that. I'm coming for you, gateway, and you'd better still be standing when I get there. Images of that tunnel through space, and possibly time too, danced in his head as the others discussed the minutiae of their plan. Garen almost tripped over his feet when Natalie's quick fingers wove an illusion that changed Arginil from a handsome angel to a demon with horns, tusks, and jagged teeth that didn't fit in his oversized mouth. But the Versailles must have run into trouble because his glowing violet eyes didn't darken or change color to something that would match his new persona. No one will believe he's a demon with eyes like that. They'll give him away, Garen pointed, just so he could graze the angel's face and confirm all the changes were illusory. His skin was still smooth, not scaly or green like the illusion made it look.
He's right.
Arginil tensed, like he expected a stab of pain to accompany the Versatis' work.
Just wait, I've got another idea.
Natalie grasped the front of his robe and pulled the angel's head down so they could cover his glowing eyes with their gloved hand.
Don't move, it won't hurt, I just need to build extra layers to block out the glow. Your eyes are too bright for a demon.
They're also the wrong color. You're better off making him look like a fallen angel. Garen waved to the halo floating above the angel's head. Don't forget to hide that too. Demons don't have halos. Natalie glared at him.
I know, I'll work on that next.
The Versati removed their hand from his eyes and flicked their fingers. Arginil's halo vanished.
There, what do you think now?
Natalie stepped back to view their work. Garen circled the angel and nodded. It's not bad. Not bad at all. How does it feel to look like a demon? Garen smacked the angel's backside. He couldn't help it. Arginil was too serious. He needed to lighten up a bit, and he had a nice hard backside perfect for smacking.
Must you do that?
Arginil slapped his hand away and glared at Garen with dull, greenish eyes that matched his new face. No, I only hit on the pretty ones who can knock me into next Tuesday. I would never hit on someone weaker than me, because that wouldn't be fair. But you're stronger than me, and you captured me and threw me into prison, so you're fair game. Garen shrugged. That was his general rule. Anyway, Arginil stared at him for a moment as he searched for something to say, but he must not have found anything, so he caught Natalie's attention with a wave.
How long do you need to disguise the rest of them?
Not long, you were the hardest because of your magic. It doesn't want to be hidden.
Natalie hurried over to Thaniel.
So that's why it was so easy to break the glamour over you. I wish I knew who put it on you in the first place. That must have been an impressive bit of magic to last so long it fooled you into thinking it was real.
Daniel stood with her arms folded, watching everything with disapproving violet eyes. Someone was unhappy about the illusions. Oh well, they were the best way to reach the gateway without a lot of bother. Garion tapped Arginil's arm. So you'll apologize for throwing me into prison?
No, you deserved it, and what would be the point? You escaped, didn't you?
Well, yes, I did. Garan stood there. What was the point? Did he really want an apology?
But you had help to escape.
Telly just had to point out. Perhaps he should drop this and think about something else, like the gateway, since that's where they headed after this. Can you really take down the gateway? Garan hoped not, as he wandered over to where Arginil paced. He needed the gateway to stay up long enough for him to run through it and reach the other end. Who knew how long the gateway tunnel was? The illusion didn't sit well with Arginil, but that was too bad. The angel kept rubbing his face like the illusion was something that he could wipe off if he rubbed hard enough.
Probably not, but I need to try. Why did you agree to come? I thought you wanted to find the rebels and turn them into your personal army.
Garan wanted that. that, but not as much as he wanted to find out what was on the other side of that gateway. Every thought swung back to it since Argeniel mentioned it. That should have convinced Garen to have nothing to do with it, because it was messing with his mind, and he had rules about that. But the gateway was a giant glowing exit from this place, and he couldn't ignore that. It's worth any risk to get out of here. That's still the plan. Maybe I'm hoping if I help you, you'll help me. Garen tried for a hopeful look, but he probably just looked like excitement fizzed inside him. Let the angel make of that what he wished. Argeniel turned away and said nothing in reply. That was fine, since the plan had changed anyway. Garen watched Natalie place an illusion over Thaniel that turned the angel into a red-skinned demoness, and then Natalie strode toward him. Is it my turn now? Garen rested a hand on his chest.
You're the only one left besides me.
Natalie patted him down again, just like earlier, and they weren't gentle about it. Why do I get beat up in the process? You were so gentle with him. Garen jerked his thumb in Argeniel's general direction.
Because you don't have magic that would resist me if I cause the slightest amount of discomfort.
Natalie proved it by poking him in the gut. Are you saying discomfort triggers his magic? Garen whispered, so they weren't overheard. He needn't have worried, since the two angels stood some distance away talking in low voices. Hopefully they were putting together a better plan than the one Argeniel volunteered earlier. But Garen doubted it. Argeniel's shoulders were bunched up from tension, and that wasn't the illusion's doing. The angel was created to be a martyr, and he had the self-sacrificing personality to go with it, and that was reason enough to get as far away from that angel as possible. Garen wouldn't go down as a martyr too. No way in hell would he do that.
Yes, any negative emotion will do it, but pain above all will trigger it.
Natalie froze as if they realized they'd said too much. The Versati glanced at Argeniel as if seeking his approval. Was there longing in those eyes? That makes sense, since he's been down here for thousands of years. I doubt his own kind treated him well. Garen shook his head in pretend sympathy. All the more reason to stay as far away from him as possible. He's so bottled up, I don't want to be around when he explodes in case he destroys half of hell in the process. Garen backed away as slowly as he could manage and hoped it wasn't obvious.
Probably not. You're done. We should go now.
Natalie shoved him toward the angels. What about you? Don't you need an illusion? Garen waved to their veil, robes, and hood. Aren't you conspicuous like that? Natalie shook their head as they pretended to fix their slipper to cover them, picking up something from the ground. A violet glow slid into their skirt pocket. So, Natalie had the pendant now. Let them have it. Garen didn't need it where he was going.
Stop that or you'll interfere with the illusion.
Natalie ran over to Argeniel and pulled the illusion back in place to cover his long black hair. It was too fine and too untangled to belong to a demon.
Pretend you're escorting me. I'll have to stay close to you to keep the illusion intact.
Natalie slipped their arm through his, but they didn't sound unhappy about sticking close to the angel. He was gorgeous, as all angels were, but a little too morose for Garen's liking. The illusion masked Argeniel's reaction if he had one. Natalie stuck to him like a burr, and that was good, actually. If they were busy maintaining the illusion over the brooding angel, then they wouldn't have time to do anything else. Good. Argeniel can take Natalie to the sleeping angel, so I don't need to fulfill that promise. And that was for the best, since Garen didn't know how to find her. I'll bet he can find her since he's an angel too. They can probably sense each other or something. After all, Garen could sense his fellow ex-gods, and that gave him pause, because he sensed a bunch of them converging on the city, but he couldn't narrow that sensation down to get a read on which ex-gods, or how many. It was just a general sense that they were near. Were they after the gateway too? I need to hurry this up. But what could he tell his companions to convince them to run toward the city like their butts were on fire? Garen ground his teeth as he tried different reasons out in his mind, and they all sounded suspicious. Damn it, he was trying to throw suspicion anywhere except at himself. Garen smiled behind the illusion over his face as Natalie batted Argeniel's hand away from his face so they could fix the illusion again. Natalie was sweet on the angel anyway, and it made sense, since Versati were created to lie and Argeniel could see the truth. I guess opposites attract. Keep Natalie so busy hiding you, so they don't notice when I pop through the gateway to make my cousin pay until it's too late. Before anyone could notice he was scheming so hard smoke should pour out of his ears, Garen waved to get everyone's attention. If everyone's ready, let's get this show on the road. Since there was no road, just a flat plain terrain dotted with ruins between the library and the city. They could have walked side by side, but that didn't suit Guérin's plans at all. So he hurried to put some distance between him and them. Not a lot of distance, because that would tip Natalie off to his plans, but enough that he rounded the shield first and stopped before he ran into the drooling Kazazel. Guérin hoped the illusion Natalie created for him wasn't the same one as before. I should have asked what illusion I'm wearing. Well, it was too late now to worry about that.
Yes, you. Take your mates and break that shield.
Kazazel pointed at the gold semi-transparent dome over the library.
Don't stop until it's down.
It'll take more than just the four of us. We could hack at it for years and not make a single dent in it. Guérin shook his head as an idea grabbed him. He willed the angels to stay quiet and let him handle this. Guérin wrapped an arm around Kazazel's thin shoulders and turned him toward the city. What you need are more demons. With an army hacking away at it, someone's bound to find a weakness. Imagine a million axes biting into that shield. It'll crack like an egg and rain shards on the ground as your army marches past. Let us gather that army for you. Guérin waved to the city. Was his spiel enough to convince the fallen angel?
He's right,
Said the guy wearing a skirt made of leather strips whose name Guérin never got. It was certainly a bold fashion choice for a battlefield, since the guy didn't pair it with any armor. He must be a demon, though. No one would march toward a battlefield so underdressed, except perhaps an ex-god. But this guy wasn't one.
Of course you'd agree with him. You'd do anything to get out of doing any real work,
Said a woman in armor. A blacksmith hammered a lion's head into her breastplate and also into the helm hanging from her belt. She radiated power, and her cool gaze assessed Guérin. I like her. I hope we cross swords someday, either in battle or in bed. Guérin fanned himself. It was so hot under the illusion, and his pants felt 2 sizes too tight. But Guérin didn't chime in, even though he wanted to flirt with her in the worst way possible. A bunch of inappropriate comments crowded his mind, but none would diffuse the situation. The skirt-wearing warrior laughed at her insinuation.
What can 2 swords do against that?
He pointed at the shield.
Nothing. I don't know who built it, but they knew what they were doing.
Unfortunately, the maker of that shield stood behind Guérin. Only Natalie's power kept him hidden, and the Versati must be working overtime on that, because no one remarked on it.
I know the caster. This can't be as strong as you say. He doesn't have that kind of power. He's broken, and so is his magic.
Kazazel made a rude gesture at the library. Interesting. But Kazazel's opinion wasn't important, or even true. Arginil was neither weak nor broken now. Guérin pictured the disheveled angel that captured, questioned, and carried him to the spire. There was nothing weak or soft about Arginil then, but he wasn't cruel either. Kazazel definitely was cruel. Perhaps the fallen angel saw Arginil's lack of cruelty as weakness. That's something for someone else to ponder, though, because I'm getting out of hell as soon as we reach the gateway, so he'd better hurry this along. A shadow appeared in front of him, and it threw its arms back, sending its black cloak flying in the wind as the shadow resolved into an impossibly gorgeous man with glowing violet eyes and flowing blonde hair. A gold halo wrapped around his throat, marking him as a fallen angel. He also decided today was a good day to wander around half naked. Not that Guérin minded, since the fellow striding around in his underwear left all his muscles on display, but they were as fake as his pretty face. This fallen angel didn't do anything that could be considered work, and musculature like that required constant attention. Guérin knew all too well what it took to keep that kind of muscle tone, and it didn't include prancing about in a dark cloak looking impressive. But it was a nice show, and Guérin would have enjoyed it if he didn't have somewhere to be.
Why haven't you destroyed the library and brought its creator to our lord yet? What are you waiting for? It's unguarded.
Sir Prancelot waved his hand around and dramatically flourished his cape. Come on, we have our orders. Guérin signaled to his group to move out. As Kazazel searched for a reason, he hoped they followed him. Now was the time to make haste. Who knew if fallen angels could sense their brethren? Now wasn't the time to find out. The sooner they got to the city, the better. But the buildings on the outskirts were about a mile away. Can we pick up the pace without straining the illusions? Because we need to put some distance between them and us as soon as possible. Guérin whispered and hoped Natalie heard him.
I think we can, but you should drop back so you're behind Arginil. This way if his illusion breaks, you'll shield him from view since you're taller than him.
Guérin hadn't realized that until Natalie pointed it out. Angels were usually very tall, but Arginil wasn't. He wasn't short either, not by by anyone's standards, but he didn't have that towering presence Daniel had.
Did you hear me?
Natali patted his back. Yes, but he didn't want the Versati ahead of him. He didn't see a way around that, though. A glance behind them showed another fallen angel appeared since they fled, and she looked as formidable as the prancing one. There was no reason to believe more weren't inbound. Damn it. Garen slowed to let them pass him. I'll just overtake them in the city. There would be plenty of opportunities then. I'll make one of them work. No one will stop me this time.
Chapter 28. Throw It Away. Arjanel glanced at the library over his shoulder. The shield silhouetted 13 people. I should go back.
Keep going.
Garen slammed his hands into his back and pushed him forward.
We should probably run to maintain our cover. The demons you three are pretending to be would run after receiving the orders we got.
Natali pulled on his arm. Arjanel didn't have a choice, so he turned his head and fixed his gaze on the buildings at the edge of the city. The cobbled street ended so abruptly that it was probably cut away in the event that created the remains of the structures they passed. Long ago they collapsed, and time wore them away to nubs that were easily stepped over or ran around. He glanced back once before the buildings at the edge of the city blocked his view of the library. I hope the shield holds. That was all he could do right now. The metal shutters were down over the windows, the doors were barred, and the traps were set. The library must stand or fall without him.
The gateway is more important,
whispered that woman, who might be the sleeping angel, or she might be someone else, but either way, she was right. The denizens in hell weren't supposed to leave it, and he couldn't turn his back on that and ignore it. It was his damned nature to do something about it.
Can they break through?
Natali swayed and gripped his arm harder than necessary. They must be tiring from casting 3 full-body illusions and the constant tweaking it took to keep the one he was wearing intact. Maybe they could drop them when they entered the city. The buildings were closer now. They'd reach them soon. I don't know. Arjanel resisted the urge to tug at the illusion. It wasn't choking him. It just felt like it was. But it wasn't actually constricting his neck. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. The dry air made his throat tight, but it felt like hands squeezed his neck to cut off his breath. Arjanel pulled at the illusion around his neck to relieve the pressure, and the tightness eased. But Natali didn't slap his hand away as they'd done the whole march to the city. The Versati stumbled on the broken cobbles as the dusty plain ended, and they would have fallen if he didn't catch them. Only their eyes showed in the space between their hood and veil, and they were as gray as their clothes. But their eyes were a pretty shade of bright pink not long ago. Their lids drooped, probably from exhaustion. Let the illusion go, you can't keep it up. Arjanel slipped an arm under the Versati's legs and picked up the shape changer. They weighed almost nothing at all, and that probably wasn't good.
If I do that, then everyone will see who you really are. That will draw too much attention since you don't look like you did before, according to Thaniel.
Natali rested their head against his chest and closed their eyes. Thaniel leaned in and whispered,
Then let everything else go except the illusion covering his halo. If you rest your hand here, no one can tell he doesn't have a collar.
His friend moved Natali's hand to rest right on the spot where the illusion choked him again. Arjanel glared at her, but Thaniel paid no attention to him. He couldn't pull the illusion away from his neck because he was carrying Natali. Was this just a ploy to get him to stop touching the illusion? Because it had done its job. With his hands full, he couldn't mess with it anymore. Thaniel nodded at her suggestion.
That should work, since I doubt anyone we'll run into remembers what he looked like before the fall, and we just saw a fallen angel who doesn't look god-awful. In fact, you can do the same for me. I can pretend to be an evil bitch, and that'll give me a reason to stick close to you both, so I don't wander off and get into trouble.
Daniel grinned, but nothing she said was funny. Maybe it was the illusory red eyes making her look mischievous, or maybe she was actually thinking about ditching them to go off on her own. What would she do if she split off from them? Why did you really come to hell? Arjanel paused at an intersection as he recalled what she told him in the library. Was that the real reason? He could picture Azrael boasting about his trip to hell, but was that really enough to motivate Thaniel to go to hell? Was she that bored in heaven? Arjanel didn't remember heaven heaven being that boring, but the last time he was there, the place was rent asunder by a civil war between angels. It was a confusing and tumultuous time. He couldn't recall what heaven was like before that, but he was the last generation of angels to be created before that schism.
That won't work because you both have wings and the fallen angels don't have them.
Natali shook their head and their hands slid up his chest, probably to adjust the illusion.
We can hide them ourselves. They're like feathered cloaks we can put on or take off whenever we want.
Daniel mimed throwing them away. Arjanil shuddered at the thought as he glanced at the intersection and tried to remember which road led to the gateway. He wouldn't give up his wings for anything.
Not even for a chance to return to heaven?
Asked the sleeping angel, but no one else reacted, so she hadn't spoken to anyone except him, and that was worrisome. Am I imagining her voice? He had no proof that she was real. The other time she appeared to him could have been a hallucination for all he knew. Kazazel's harsh words echoed in his mind. Maybe I am broken. I'm in hell when I shouldn't be. Arjanil picked a street and turned left just to do something. Hopefully it led to the gateway. If he didn't find it soon, he'd just fly to the damn thing and deal with anybody that challenged him later. If he did that, it would make it harder to dismantle the gateway.
How can you take off your wings? Aren't they attached? Wouldn't that hurt?
Natali slid an arm around his neck. Even though that wasn't necessary, he wouldn't drop them, and carrying the Versati wouldn't tire him anyway. He wasn't human. He was an angel, and it was his duty to carry those who couldn't carry on.
Oh, it's easy.
Thaniel waved the question away.
I just imagine they're in my pocket with my hammer, my sword, and my armor, and poof, they're in storage until I recall them.
Natali narrowed their eyes and gave him a speculative look that probably didn't bode well.
Can you put your halos away too?
I don't know, but I never thought to try.
Daniel looked like she was considering it. Don't even try that. Arjanil turned right at the next intersection, taking the road where buildings bore some damage, possibly from the shockwave generated by the gateway when it opened.
Why not?
Daniel hopped over a pile of bricks in the middle of the cobbled street that may have come from the missing corner of a roof. What if he can't get it back? Arjanil avoided another pile of rocks. He didn't want to send his wings away. They pressed against his back and their warm weight reassured him. They were still there. He could take to the sky whenever he wanted.
Why not? My wings come back when I want them. Why wouldn't my halo do that too?
Daniel glanced at the closed shops on either side of the street. No one moved within them or on the street they followed. Where was everyone? I don't know. I'm not sending my wings away, but you can do whatever you want. Arjanil wished they'd dropped the subject already.
Why not? You sent your blade away. It comes back when you call it. Why wouldn't your wings do the same thing?
Daniel kicked a pebble and it ricocheted off the building across the street. I don't care if my sword never comes back, but he couldn't continue existing without his wings and the freedom they gave him. The thought of losing his wings forever and never getting to fly again froze him with fear, and he shivered until Natali rubbed the back of his neck. I can't lose my wings, he said so softly he might have been talking to himself.
You won't.
Daniel patted his shoulder, and the fear eased its grip on him.
It's okay. You don't have to send them away. I can modify the illusion on you both, but I need energy for that and I'm tapped out right now.
Natali closed their eyes and let their head loll as if they lacked the strength to hold it up anymore.
How do you refuel? Do we need to stop and get food? Do they have food in hell?
Daniel wandered over to the shop across the street and glanced in the window. I don't think that would help, nor would he ask what would help, because he couldn't volunteer for what the Versati was dancing around. No thank you. The illusion was failing on its own, judging by how little it itched or pinched anymore. Did it matter if anyone saw them now?
Well, then how do you power up?
Daniel caught up easily. Why couldn't she drop this subject? There was only one way Natali could refill their reserves, and it didn't bear thinking about.
A kiss would help,
Natali said, and he almost tripped in surprise. That wasn't what he thought they would say, but he was quite sure the Versati wanted to kiss him if the hand caressing the back of his neck was any indication. Nope, not happening. Hell twisted everything, and who knew what else they'd get with that kiss besides more energy.
I've never kissed a demon before. How do we do this so Mr. Gallant here doesn't drop you?
Thaniel clapped a hand on his shoulder and peered at Natali like they were a problem that needed solving. You're actually thinking of doing it? Arjanil backed away.
Sure, why not? You'll carry me if I feel faint.
Thaniel batted her eyes at him, then threw her head back and laughed. He probably looked as appalled at the idea of her kissing a demon as he felt. Where was Garen? He should do this since he didn't need all his power to take down the gateway. The ex-war god should have made at least a dozen wisecracks about this by now. Well, maybe not a dozen. That might be giving Garen too too much credit, but he should have said something. Wasn't he still with them? Arjanil hadn't really paid much attention to the ex-war god since they entered the city, but Giran should still be with them, unless he lied about wanting to help take down the gateway. What did he really want to come to the city for? Did it matter? I guess it doesn't, because he's not my responsibility.
You can't do it because we're counting on you to take apart this gateway thing. So you need all your power for that. But I can't help with that unless there's something to fight.
Daniel grinned like this was all part of some grand adventure. Where's Giran? Arjanil turned and glanced behind them, but there was no one there. Not a soul moved inside the buildings or on the street except them. The spot between his wings itched like a target hung there.
He volunteered to be our rear guard and keep watch in case those creeps we left outside the library decide to follow us.
Daniel waved over her shoulder, but she didn't stop or glance around.
You should go ahead, find that gateway, and get a head start on the reconnoiter part of the plan while I help Natalie get back on their feet.
Daniel shoved her arms under the Versace and scooped them out of his arms before he could protest.
Go on, we'll catch up.
Natalie waved at him, so he left since they didn't need him anymore. Arjanil ripped the illusion off and dropped the tangled threads of its magic onto the ground. He didn't need it where he was going. The gateway wouldn't care who he was or what he looked like, and there was plenty of debris strewn across the road ahead. If he needed to hide, he could just duck behind the nearest one.
Chapter 29, Lost in the Dark. The staircase ended 6 steps below, or maybe 7. It was hard to tell with her hand cupped around the Lumiere crystal, letting barely enough light shine on the step she set her foot on. But the Lumiere crystal's light carried far in the dark, so she must dim it somehow to keep any light from spilling out of the stairwell into the tunnel beyond, in case a demon prowled through the darkness.
Stay here while I check for lights,
Nirel whispered as he descended the last steps. Of course, Rand didn't follow instructions well, so Rosalie thrust her arm out to stop him from following his friend.
Why did you do that?
Rand pushed her arm aside, but he couldn't pass her because the stairs were too narrow to permit that, and he wasn't a small man. Rand was broad-chested and tall, and she easily blocked him by just standing there. Because you're too stubborn to wait. Rosalie shot him a glare over her shoulder, but he ignored it as usual. Rosalie shook her head. She couldn't let anything happen to him, even if he infuriated her sometimes. Ran and Mirren were the only ones untouched by the changes to the timeline, and she needed them to stay that way in case her quest to fix their future consumed her life.
I don't see any lights. Let's go quickly and quietly before that changes. Oh, and keep your lights dimmed as much as possible.
Nerul crept out through the portal into the tunnel beyond. Rosalie believed him. Really, she did. She just didn't know him that well, but she knew Ran very well, and he wasn't a quiet person. Ran was still the chatty child she met years ago who was bursting to talk. So the odds of Ran following any of Nerul's instructions were pretty slim. Rosalie threw an arm out to stop him from passing her after she stepped off the staircase.
Why are you blocking me? He said the coast's clear, but I never understood why anyone uses that phrase since we're nowhere near a coast. And why is the coast being clear a good thing?
Rand pushed her arm aside again, but this time he forgot to whisper, "Shh, you must be quiet. We don't know if demons need light to see." Rosalie hurried to the portal and glanced out. Nerul stood flat against the wall opposite the portal and covered his face with his hand to muffle laughter. "We're so doomed. Or they would be without her." Rosalie touched her pocket where the crystal that might have frozen the demons yesterday rested, but she didn't see any reason to pull it out or play with its powers. Rand peered over her head at the tunnel.
There you see. There's no one around except us. You worry too much.
He patted her shoulder as he squeezed past her. "No, I don't." Rosalie suppressed a sigh. This was what having a sibling was like.
Yes, you do, but that's okay. Everyone needs someone to worry about.
Rand studied the rock formations, probably looking for clues to determine the direction they should go. At least she hoped that's what he was doing when he tipped his head back to study the stalactites on the ceiling overhead.
Don't use so much light.
Nerul reached out and tried to cover the Lumiere crystal in Rand's hand. But Rand was taller than him, so he just raised his hand until it was out of reach. "Don't you know where to go? This was your plan, after all." Rosalie folded her arms. They were so doomed. What if he couldn't find the farm? I can't spend weeks looking for it. yet, but she might have to if Rand didn't pick a direction soon.
I think it's this way.
Rand strode away from the staircase like he knew what he was doing.
You think, but you don't know for sure?
Nuril hurried after him.
Well, no, not exactly. It's been a while, and I'm a lot taller now, so it all looks different.
Rand waved his hand around to indicate the stalagmites they passed.
And I don't have a map inside my head, not like my dad anyway. He knew where everything was.
A note of sadness crept into his voice, but Rand strode on, and his long strides carried him away like he was late for a party. He also forgot to whisper again, so everything he said echoed off the walls. The echoes chased Rosalie as she hurried to catch up. Oh, Rand, you're the worst person for this mission. But it wasn't his fault he wasn't suited to this. Rand liked to be seen and to stand at the center of attention. Supposedly, he knew where the farm was. So she put her head down and ran.
Where are you, Rosalie?
Mom whispered, stopping her in her tracks. Rosalie's heart soared. Mom missed her. I'm right here, Mom. Where are you? Was this real or a trick? Darkness surrounded Rosalie as she clenched her fist around the Lumiere crystal.
Is the wild hunt taking care of my baby? Or is it already too late for my precious daughter?
Mom said, but what was she talking about? Why would the wild hunt have her daughter? Wait a minute. Mom only has one child, and that's me. The wild hunt never kidnapped me. So what was she hearing? An auditory hallucination? What brought that on? Rosalie felt for a wall to put her back against in case this was a prelude to an attack or something. If there were demons with blood armor and magic, then there could be one with mind magic. She shivered at the thought of a demon using that kind of magic on her, but she had no other explanation for this.
Show me my daughter,
Mom begged from somewhere far away, and her voice echoed in the tunnel. But Mom isn't here, and she doesn't beg. She takes what she wants. Rosalie unclenched her fist to let a little light shine into the darkness as she turned and scanned the tunnel before and behind her. A drop of cold water landed on her head. Then a little girl whispered from somewhere close by.
Come with me, Mummy.
I didn't say that, but oh God, was she thinking about it? She hadn't seen her mother since all those memories of a demon invasion slammed into her mind and the forest died around her. Rosalie spun, looking for the child who sounded like her.
Mommy, are you there?
Who are you? Rosalie spun, but there was no one there. Just the darkness and the stalactites above, dripping cold water on her that fell like tears, and they glittered in the light of the Lumiere crystal clenched in her fist.
I'm coming, honey. Just hang on a little longer,
Mom said as the world spun around Rosalie.
The real question is, who are you?
Asked the little girl, as small hands shoved Rosalie hard enough to knock her to her knees in a puddle of cold water, soaking her skirt and the trousers she layered under them.
Who are you? I'm the monster the world made me, but who are you?
A girl peered over her shoulder, and she wore her face for a moment, then a sneer twisted it. Hands grasped her shoulders and shoved Rosalie into the cold water rising around her. She dropped the Lumiere crystal and thrust her hands out to stop this, but her hands sank into the cold, dark water, pulling her down. Darkness snuffed out the only light in the tunnel. Water plinked as it struck something nearby. Rosalie opened her eyes and stared into the hard brown eyes of her mother, but Mom was 2 decades younger than the woman she argued with a few days before she met Avarian and faced a real demon.
Am I in jail?
Mom asked. Why was she lying on a rough stone floor that looked exactly like the ones in the tunnels under Mount Eredrin?
Mommy,
said the little girl who pushed Rosalie in a sing-song voice that grated on her nerves. But Mom wasn't fooled. She didn't glance away, nor did a flicker of recognition cross her face. Doesn't she see me? I'm lying on the ground less than a foot from her face. Mom had better than perfect vision, so she should see her. Mom was so close. Rosalie could reach out and touch her. Rosalie tried to raise her arm, but it wouldn't respond to her mental commands. Why can't I move?
Mommy, say something, please,
said that girl who wasn't Rosalie. I'll bet she's a demon. Rosalie struggled to move a finger or a toe. Anything would do, so long as it broke her paralysis. That's not me. Don't listen to her, Mom. Was she a witch then? Rosalie couldn't remember when Mom found out about that. The whole witch thing didn't fit her plans, so her mom had a difficult relationship with it. But Mom was a sharp woman, and not a trusting one either. Her natural distrust should lend her some protection. Rosalie hoped as the darkness lightened a little, revealing they were in a rough stone tunnel just like the one at the bottom of the staircase she'd just left. Why was Mom at Mount Eredrin? When did she first meet Rand's father? Rosalie couldn't remember ever hearing that story. Fear clamped cold hands around her heart. Rand never mentioned his mother. What did you do, Mom? Please tell me you didn't break up Rand's parents. But it was possible. Mom was stubborn, and she pursued the things she wanted with a single-minded determination that Rosalie inherited. And Sarn is the complete opposite of my father. Sarn was kind and considerate, and he must have seemed like a prince out of a fairy tale with all that magic at his beck and call. Oh God, Mom, please tell me you didn't pursue him. Rosalie couldn't think of any other reason for her mom to visit Mount Airdren except to see Sarn. There wasn't much else to recommend the place, unless one liked architecture, history, or shopping, and none of that would interest Mom. A small hand appeared, but there was no body accompanying it. That freakish hand combed the chin-length brown locks that escaped from Mom's hood away from her eyes. A pair of little feet appeared at the edge of the puddle Mom lay in, right below the hand, stroking her hair. "That's not me! Mom, you need to get up and run!" Rosalie flexed her fingers behind her back, but she still couldn't raise her arm. A shadow fell over her.
"Rosalie?"
Mom said, but she still didn't blink or move a muscle. Was she paralyzed too?
Yes, Mommy, you must get up now.
The little girl who pushed Rosalie into the puddle appeared in between her and her mother. The demonic thing did something to Mom.
The good mage needs you.
"The good mage?"
Mom said in a dazed voice like she was drugged or something. But Mom never ate or drank anything that could alter her perceptions or dull her sharp wits. She was ridiculously careful about that, even going so far as to refuse food cooked in wine. And I teased her about that too. Rosalie blinked back tears as a sharp stab of guilt struck her heart. If I live through this, I'll pay attention to what I eat and drink too. A green glow appeared between Mom and that girl. Rosalie couldn't see what generated it since it turned the girl into a soft silhouette.
"No."
Mom shouted as the light intensified.
"I'm okay. I'm waiting for you with the bright boy,"
said that girl as she faded.
"Come get me. I want to go home."
Bright boy. The nickname struck Rosalie like a physical blow. She knew that girl meant ran. What's happening? Layla, can you hear me? I need help. Layla didn't reply. Nor had she the dozen times Rosalie had called her since returning to Mount Airdren.
"You sound like me,"
Mom said in awe as that green light blotted out everything. It reminded Rosalie of Sarn. His magic was that green and that bright. "I have to go now, Mommy. Keep the furry ones away from the good mage, okay? They want him bad. Don't let them take him." Rosalie covered her mouth. Those words came out of her mouth. How could I say that when I don't know what that means? But Mom knew, and she sounded sharper now and less dazed as she seized on that warning.
"You mean the shapeshifters? What could they possibly want with him?"
"Not them. The other furry ones. Don't let them take him." The words jumped out of Rosalie's mouth again without her permission. When did Mom have anything to do with shapeshifters? What are you tangled up in, Mom? And why did she have the sinking feeling that Sarn and Rand were caught in it too?
"You mean the wild hunt?"
Mom said like she understood. There was a hint of the determination and iron will that ruled her.
"I don't know who they are, just that they're awfully furry and they have claws,"
said the little girl from right next to Rosalie.
"Then you don't have to worry because they're not here, and here is where he must stay."
Mom sounded certain of things now.
"Wait, will I see you again?"
"Will she see you again?"
The little girl asked Rosalie this time, as that strange paralysis settled on her again, freezing her in place. But Rosalie couldn't answer that question because it hinged on so many things. Faye's warning echoed in her mind about how hard the future was to change. Am I a fool for trying?
"Protect the good mage, Mommy. Keep the furry ones away from him. Promise me you will,"
said the little girl, like she was reading from a script. But there was only one person the good mage could refer to, and that was Sarn. The nickname fit him like a glove. He was a good mage because he chose to be that way.
"I promise,"
Mom said, and she sounded like she was smiling, but Rosalie couldn't tell because the green light turned her mom into a silhouette.
"Twice more, Mommy, promise me."
The little girl patted Rosalie's shoulder, unfreezing her.
"I promise,"
Mom said louder now, as if she gained strength from that vow.
"Once more, Mommy, promise me."
The little girl bent and caught Rosalie's hand.
"I promise."
Mom said like she meant it, and she better because she was bound now.
"Now, say this with me, Mommy. So mote it be by the witch's decree."
The little girl pulled Rosalie up to a sitting position.
"So mote it be by the witch's decree."
Mom shouted as the green light obliterated everything. When the light vanished, Mom was gone, but the little girl of 4 or 5 wasn't. She stared back at Rosalie with calm brown eyes. Her little face wore a placid expression like nothing just happened. 3 white glowing threads floated where Mom was, and they braided together until the 3 strands were one. What are they? Rosalie extended her hand and touched a strand. It represented the asker, a baby in a bassinet who watched a green-haired baby push on the branches a fawn girl had driven into the earth to corral his explorations. If that little boy isn't Ran, I'll eat my boots. The little girl said nothing. She just watched Rosalie touch the next strand. This one represented the Promisor, The unconscious woman who lay on a hard stone floor under Mount Eridren. That's Mom. Her identity didn't surprise Rosalie, just her location. Why are you under Mount Eridren? This made no sense. The last strand was Sarn, but not as she ever knew him. He was gangly and had that unfinished look of a teenager, but his magic burned as brightly inside him as ever. So that hadn't changed. Will you tell me what's happening? And who are you? Rosalie pulled her hand away from the little girl.
You know who I am.
The little girl grew up before her eyes, until she was a mirror image of Rosalie, dressed in different clothes. Rosalie drew back in alarm. No, you're not me. You're a demon or something else pretending to be me.
No, I'm not, and I can prove it if you'll let me.
She extended her hand.
But you'll have to trust me. Will you come with me? I promise. I'll explain everything.
Rosalie stared at her, then dropped her gaze because it was unnerving to look into her own eyes. How do I know I can trust you?
Because we're the same woman. If you trust yourself, then you can trust me.
Her double rose and extended her hand again.
Rosalie, are you okay?
Ran asked as large hands grasped her shoulders and shook her. No, Ran, I'm not okay. But Rosalie focused on the warmth of his strong hands. He made a good anchor, and she closed her eyes on this insanity, letting the darkness and the cold take her. When I wake, Ran will make some silly comment about me fainting from the brilliance of his plan, and I'll laugh and find out none of this was real. Rosalie wished for that with all her heart as she squeezed her eyes closed.
You've been listening to Part 7 of Summon the Gods, Book 2 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the sequel publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full-cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.